getting to Ramkeli, where the two will meet Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, let's try to get some background of what's happening. And naturally, before speaking on Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, we offer our praise. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is attempting to go to Vrindavan, apparently. But as we will find out later, he has another intention in mind, which he'll say no one understands. So, the Lord is in Bengal, and the devotees think he's going to Vrindavan. So much so that one extraordinary devotee, Nrsingananda Brahmachari, decided to make his version of an offering to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, he had nothing materially that we could accept through gross vision. He had no material goods, no wealth. What could he offer to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? But to see his determination, he knew that bhakti cannot be checked by any material circumstances. What is it that causes interruptions to our service? It's because of hetu, a material cause, a material motivation. When actually the two have nothing to do with one another. There's no connection between material causes and pure devotional service. If our service is interrupted, if we come across a situation in which we think no service can be done in this situation, we think like that because there's a material motivation to our service. This is important to understand when we're trying to grasp what is pure love. Everyone is most intoxicated by pure love, and that is the deepest core aspiration that a person has. And we'll never rest in peace until we actually can experience what is pure love. This is the deepest core desire of the living entity. So Nrsingananda Brahmachari, he knew his service does not depend on his financial situation. It doesn't depend on his material situation in any aspect. This is so good for us to hear. Bhakti goes on unchecked by any material circumstance. Knowing that, we can be assured and confident that we'll be able to serve Krishna if we truly desire that. We'll be able to serve Krishna in any circumstance. Do we think that Krishna is so strict and rigorous with his devotee that he puts you in circumstances or allows you to be in circumstances in which there's no chance to serve him? Because of the devotee's deep attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the devotee is able to see service opportunities anywhere, anyhow. Just like someone who is, you don't know, but someone who is an expert burglar or a thief. They can see opportunities to steal anywhere. Once I was on the platform of the train station in Delhi to go to Mathura. And it was just, I think it might have been me alone. And I had my bag, small shoulder bag, with my valuables, documents, and all that at my feet as I stood on the platform. And then, while I was just looking down the tracks for the train, it could appear that I was not paying attention. I felt this slight nudge in the back. But so slight. Just, it was done perfectly. Enough so I couldn't ignore it, but not enough that I would just spring into external consciousness and, oh, who's doing it? It was just so tiny. And enough that you would just instinctively, without thinking, turn your head to see what was that little nudge in the back. But fortunately, I was attentive to Krishna service that day, and I knew exactly what was going on. As soon as I felt the nudge in my back, I looked straight in front of me, and there was this man. Yeah. How he got there in front of me without my noticing, but it's like a mystic ability. Pickpocket, they work in teams. So he was just waiting for me to turn to see who nudged me in the back, and then of course he grabbed the bag and run off. But instead of turning around, I just looked straight ahead at him. He just kind of looked back at me. All right, so you know what's going on. all right. Good on you. Well, no one would have ever thought this is an opportunity to steal. But an expert thief, he can see those opportunities. We want to be expert in seeing opportunities to serve Krishna, but that requires empowered vision. And the empowered vision comes when there is no material desire attached to our service. Then Krishna empowers you to see opportunities for service anywhere, everywhere. Someone who knows how to make money, they can see opportunity for financial gain in any situation. Whereas an ordinary person can't see that. We want to become empowered by Krishna, and hearing about Nishrigananda Brahmachari, how he saw service opportunities, will help us. So, he heard that Lord Chaitanya is going to Vrindavan. So he decided, I have nothing in terms of the gross material energy to offer the Lord. I will offer him a subtle creation through my mind. So with his mind, he made a road to Vrindavan for Lord Chaitanya to walk on. First, he laid down a bed of jewels on the road. And then on top of the jewels, he put stemless flowers. And on both sides of the road were beautiful, transcendental lakes. And the lakes had lotus flowers. And next to the lakes were jeweled bathhouses. And there were beautiful shade trees. And then he made pleasant breezes, cool breezes blow. He was offering this road in his mind to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So you might say, well, that's all in his mind. What? How real is that? But you see, the Lord does not discriminate. This is an offering from gross matter. This is an offering from subtle matter. The Lord accepts the attitude of his devotee and is watching to see how eager the devotee is to serve him. So this offering in the mind of the Srimananda Brahmachari was as good as anyone else's offering. You can't say that, well, he's just thinking this. He's thinking about service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's offering that service the best way he can. And the Lord knew that. But there was a problem. He couldn't get the road in his mind past a certain point. Although he tried, his mental construction couldn't go any further than a certain point. So then, he knew what was going on. He turned to Lord Chaitanya's devotees and said, the Lord will not go all the way to Vrindavan this time. The proof is, I can't get the road all the way to Vrindavan in my mind. That means he's not going. And indeed, that proved to be true. Many of you have heard this Lila before, but I asked you to reflect. How often we can psych ourselves out, discourage ourselves, that, oh, I can't serve Krishna in this situation. There's nothing that can be done. Krishna is known as Bhavagrahi. He takes the essence of the devotees' emotional offering. He doesn't look at the packaging of the circumstances. Something may look inconsequential from the material point of view, but the Lord accepts it as extraordinary if there is bhakti. This is not difficult to understand if we think of ourselves as small samples of the Supreme. A child may do something for us and it may not be materially awesome, but because of the loving attitude of the child, we are pleased. I'll give you an example I often tell. When I was a little boy, about 5 years old, it was coming near Christmas and time to buy Christmas presents for the family. So my mother gave me $1, which worth much more back then than now. She gave me $1 and said, go to the neighborhood shop and buy Christmas presents for the family. So I did that. I took the $1. I went to the neighboring neighborhood shop. It was a pharmacy. And I told the shopkeeper, I told him very majestically, I have come to buy Christmas presents for my family. I have $1. He looked at me, ooh, that's a lot of money. I'm sure your family is going to be so happy with the presents that you buy. $1, young man. Oh, you are so wealthy. So I asked him, so what can I buy with this $1? Yeah. For my mother, my father, my brother and sister. So let me show you. Here is a nice powder puff, for your mother. That'll be 25 cents. And here is a razor blade for your father. That'll be another 25 cents. And here is a pen, one each for your brother and sister. So that's $1. You got 4 things. So I got those 4 things and I wrapped them up. And then Christmas morning, my mother, father, brother, sister, they opened the packages. Oh, how wonderful this is. Oh, how thoughtful you are. Of course, they have given the money. But, they're relishing the intent of the heart. Our son has brought us he's bought us these things. He's bought his brother and sister these things. How nice. So we do that for ourselves. Don't you think Krishna does that for us? Why do we make Krishna into some kind of distant or impersonal or cruel taskmaster? He has given the all-attractive process of bhakti, but he's made it so hard to get the ultimate goal. Why should we think like that? Any loving parent is always relishing the sincere offerings of the child. So the Srinivasa Brahmachari, he knew all that. And by his attitude, his bhava, he was confident the Lord will not go to Vrindavan. I can't make the road in my mind any further. So, Lord Chaitanya has now arrived at Ramgiri. And he's dancing in the ecstasy of ecstatic love of Krishna. It seemed like unlimited people were coming to see him. So, the Mohammedan king heard of this personality attracting huge numbers of people. And with his political analysis, he came to this conclusion. Such a person who is followed by so many people without giving them charity must be a prophet. I can surely understand this fact. In other words, there must be something spiritual about this person because he's not giving anything material to anyone. So, it seems he had some good sense. He ordered his magistrate, don't disturb this person. Just let him do whatever he likes. Don't be jealous. Everyone knows politics is based on envy, jealousy. Why should you have the post? I want the post. Or you cooperate in order to manipulate the person. So the Mohammedan king, he was aware of that. And he instructed his subordinate, don't disturb this Hindu prophet. Don't be jealous of him. Let him do whatever he likes. So then, the Mohammedan king had a Hindu secretary named Keshava Chatri. And so he decided to inquire more about this Hindu prophet. But Keshava Chatri was very clever. He didn't trust the mind of a politician. So when the king asked him, can you tell me more about this mendicant, this prophet? Keshava Chatri said, oh, he's not very important at all. He only actually has a few followers. Don't worry about him. It's not worth it. Causes more trouble than gain if you become concerned with his activities. Actually, he's a mendicant wandering on pilgrimage. Only a few persons are in his group. Knowing the intrigues that go on in government, Keshava Chatri told the Mohammedan king, you have a subordinate who's plotting against this Hindu prophet. I think this shouldn't happen because it's not worth it. So this way, Keshava Chatri dealt with the king very diplomatically. He's showing you the nature of life in this world. Even for a devotee, there are intricacies. You can't blame that on Krishna. It's the nature of material existence. So Keshava Chatri did a service by using his intelligence how to deal with the king for the sake of the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So after he made light of the whole affair with the king, it's not important. One isolated prophet, mendicant, don't worry. After he pacified the king, then he sent a messenger. He sent a message to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You should leave this area immediately. Don't trust the steadiness of the king's mind. Very interesting. Sometimes we get very, we don't get very concerned, but we think that politicians have a huge impact. But we can see from Keshava Chatri that don't take them so seriously. Their minds are unstable. They can change any moment. And while Keshava Chatri minimized Lord Chaitanya to the king, he did further service by warning Lord Chaitanya, I don't trust this king, he's a politician. And you may remember throughout Chaitanya Lila, Lord Chaitanya has a thing about politicians. Even they may be great devotees. You remember, this is the case with Pratyaparucha Maharaj. His associates, Lord Chaitanya's associates, kept pleading with him. This king is such a great devotee. Maharaj Prataparita. And what did Lord Chaitanya say? That may be, but there's one thing about him that ruins everything. That word king. So you see here that Vaishnavas are known how to manipulate for the pleasure of the Lord. He wasn't living in a fairy tale world. Now the king decides to ask Rupa Goswami, who was then known as Devamrita. Let's go over the background of Rupa and Sanatan. They were very aristocratic by birth, having taken birth in a very Paka Brahmana family, which had been Paka for many generations. But they took the employment of the Mohammedan government. This is a very important point for understanding Rupa and Sanatan's situation. Why they consider themselves so fallen. If we can appreciate this, then when we hear they are pleased to Lord Chaitanya, we understand more. We need to know how they felt about themselves. They both took topmost positions right under the king. Personal secretary, personal minister of affairs. They were so expert that the king entrusted them practically to run the whole government. They were super smart in languages, in government administration. So from the external point of view, it looked like Rupa and Sanatan were expert materialists, and that's all. But after they finished their government service, in the evening they would go to their home in Ramkeli, and they would just hear Srimad Bhagavatam. Their estate they made to look like Vrindavan. They even had a Radhakund, a Shyamakund there, and they'd always hear Bhagavatam all the time. So you can see that although by their material circumstances they were considered to be fallen from the Hindu point of view, internally they were always absorbed in Radha and Krishna. Their material qualifications were extraordinarily impressive. And that's a lesson to us all, because no doubt for many, in your sojourn through material existence, you may pick up some material qualifications, some material credentials, but always consider how Rupa and Sanatan viewed that, and how they would present themselves to Lord Chaitanya, in spite of their erudition, in spite of their learning, in spite of their managemental expertise. They presented themselves to Lord Chaitanya in a most humble and mercy-inspiring way. They knew how to get the mercy. And of course, we want to follow in their footsteps. We are Rupanugas. They never let their material talents, their material expertise be an impediment to their devotional service. They truly considered themselves as fallen. They weren't just saying that. We'll talk more about that later. But for now, let's go back to the Mohammedan king. He asked Rupa Goswami, can you tell me something about this mendicant? Now, Rupa Goswami takes a different tack than Keshava Chatri. And it's very interesting, Rupa Goswami's response. And it shows you the variety of ways devotees serve Krishna. It's devotional service, as Prabhupada would always say, is not stereotyped. So different devotees have different visions and different methodologies, all for the pleasure of Krishna. So whereas Keshava Chatri was very cunning in a certain way. Oh, don't pay any attention to this prophet. He's very tiny, small time. Rupa Goswami took another approach. Who is this man again? The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who gave you this kingdom, and whom you accept as a prophet, has taken birth in your country due to your good fortune. He wasn't hiding anything. God, who gave you your kingdom, is now in your kingdom. This prophet always desires your good fortune. By his grace, all your business is successful. By his blessings, you will attain victory everywhere. Kings love to hear that. Now, Rupa Goswami says he's still Dabir Kas at that time. He's not initiated. He says something very interesting. Why are you asking me who is this person? Why don't you consult your own mind? After all, the king is, or should be, the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So certainly if you consult your own mind, it'll come up with the right answer. I always wondered about this. You have a Mohammedan king, and he's absorbed in mundane life, but yet Rupa Goswami is telling him, consult your own mind, because ideally the king represents the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My conclusion is that in association with Rupa Goswami, the king's mind worked properly. Otherwise, we just can't go up to any politician or government leader. Consult your own mind, because you're supposed to be representing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You can't even do that in India these days. Let's speak of USA. But Rupa Goswami was there. And in his association, what did the king say? Who do I think he is? He said, I consider Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no doubt about it. Jai Sisi Radha Sisi Gaura. So then, that was it. The king didn't take things any further. But we'll find out that Rupa Goswami also, he and Sanatan don't trust the king. So just see how they're maneuvering. They're not naive. They are fully aware of how the world works. It's like sometimes Srila Prabhupada, in describing his youth and his upbringing, would present himself as, in other words, he wasn't naive. He said, I was a Calcutta boy. I knew what was going on in the world. Vaishnavas are not sentimental. They understand everything as Krishna's energy and how to use everything in Krishna's service. So you're going to see Rupa Goswami's expertise. One minute he's going to say to the king, trust your mind. You're the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What appears in your mind, that's what is. And then later he's going to say something else. That's the way the world is. You have to be flexible. You have to be light on your feet, dealing with ever-changing conditions. You have to learn how to thrive on chaos. As we see throughout the world, traditions are breaking down. People's internal health is breaking down. Economies are breaking down. Government structures are breaking down. So a devotee knows how to serve Krishna effectively in those circumstances. I was speaking at the University of Toronto last week, and it's always good when you're speaking in a particular country that you need an example of the pitfalls and problems of material life and talk about another country. So I'm in Canada, I talk about the USA. So I said, did you know that south of the border, the Canadians always laugh at that. It's a way of diminishing the importance of the USA. You know, that country south of the border. Did you know that almost half of all university students have been, according to government surveys, are having at least one psychological problem. One psychological official difficulty. Almost half of all the students. So, things breaking apart. We have to get used to that these days. I was telling some devotees in Toronto how when I started doing retreat weekends with young Indian overseas students in Australia and recently graduated professionals. I started about 11 years ago. And at that time, it would be very rare, extraordinarily exceptional to find a young boy and girl, overseas Indian students, living together before marriage. That was 11 years ago. Now, there's nothing unusual at all. So, a Vaishnava knows how to deal with traditions breaking down. Social traditions, I mean. Not our bhakti traditions, but social traditions breaking down. A Vaishnava knows how to deal with the state of flux in economic and political arrangements. This intelligence comes from Krishna. Srila Prabhupada once defined the devotee as someone who knows something about everything and everything about something. We know everything about something, meaning we know Krishna as much as Krishna can be known. And in the course of serving Krishna, you get to learn something about everything. It's amazing how devotees have so many skills just by trying to serve Krishna. You know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, how to do this, how to do that. This is the exciting path of bhakti. And Rupa Goswami shows that devotees have skills at the peak level, even when considered materially. So he knew how to deal with the king. And he wasn't afraid 1 minute to tell the king, in your mind, the right decision will appear because you are the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then later he's going to say something else. He and his brother, Sanatan, are going to advise Lord Chaitanya, you better go quickly. We can't trust the king's mind. All right. Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, they decided, after much deliberation, that point is raised in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, that after much deliberation, even arguing back and forth the various points, they decided to go see Lord Chaitanya. This is a big thing because of their positions. That's why they deliberated for so long. Should we, shouldn't we, should we, shouldn't we? What are the advantages, disadvantages, pros, cons? Should we come out of the closet and just, present ourselves what we really are? So after much discussion between the two, they decided to go see Lord Chaitanya, but incognito, hidden. Because they no doubt felt it's not the time yet to fully expose ourselves. So they went in a hidden way. And in fact, not only did they disguise themselves, but they went in the middle of the night. They went to see Lord Chaitanya. And who did they encounter first? Nityananda Prabhu and Haridas. And it was Nityananda Prabhu and Haridas that went and informed Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that Rupa and Sanatan, who were known then, as you know, as Dabirkas and Sakaravali, they even had Muslim names. Nityananda and Haridas informed Lord Chaitanya that they've come. Their approach was a masterpiece of humility. They put straw in their mouth, demonstrating how inconsequential they felt they were, lower than a straw in the street. They picked the straw from the street up and put it in their mouth. And they fell down full dandavats before Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Just looking at Lord Chaitanya, they began to cry and cry. This crying was out of humility. At the same time, they're overwhelmed with joy. Bhakti is very emotional, but the emotions have extraordinary substance. Not like ordinary emotions of the material world, which although they come and go, they're not so substantial. But we are interested in the emotions of devotees because they indicate the supreme substance, the supreme personality of Godhead. Just see Rupa and Sanatan Goswami in Lord Chaitanya's presence for the first time, overwhelmed with joy and crying with humility. When will that internal state, even a drop of that, be ours? Now, they're going to offer prayers. In their prayers, we can learn how to present ourselves to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His representative. Keep in mind their material qualification, but now you've forgotten all about that due to their humble presentation of themselves before Lord Chaitanya. You've forgotten their high positions, equivalent to the Secretary of State. This is really humility. It makes one forget about the person's material qualifications. Their sincerity just overwhelms you. And they really felt that they were fallen. They weren't just saying that. They first glorified Lord Chaitanya for being Patita Pavana. They were focusing the whole presentation. Patita Pavana, that's you. So that name of yours is an indication of what we want to appeal to, because we need it. They describe themselves as Nij Jati Nij Tangi. We are born low class. We are associated with the worst, the low class. They saw themselves in that way because of their association. What Rupa and Sanatan Goswami are teaching here, this is right before their initiation, they're teaching about the power of Sangha. No matter what your birth is, if you have low association from the Vedic point of view, you are considered low. If you are born so-called low, but you have high association, you are considered high. So Rupa and Sanatan were obviously masters of this principle of association. So much so that they really felt in the core of their heart, we are fallen. Just look at who employs us. How could you have any doubts about our fallen nature? We are servants of the meat-eating Mohammedan government, therefore we are fallen. And by our accepting employment, we've lost all our prominent qualifications. When you're in someone's employment, they reason, you have to do whatever the boss says, even if it's sinful. So how can we in any way think we're exalted? We have become the worst. So therefore they said, not only is our association low class, but now we consider our birth low class. Which actually wasn't the case, but they're looking backwards. The fact that we have low association means really our birth is low class too. Just see contrast that with our attitude, perhaps, of always trying to see, well, I wasn't so bad before I took to bhakti. And I have a few skills that devotees should know about. Things would be better if they recognize my skills. No doubt we should engage everyone's talents in Krishna's service. But at the same time, a real devotee thinks, it's only by the mercy of the devotees and Lord Chaitanya that I apparently can do something. We may have fine university degrees or fine careers and employment, but we can always be helped by remembering this attitude of Rupa and Sanatan Goswami. Fallen by birth, fallen by association. They're building their case. They're presenting themselves to Lord Chaitanya in a way that they're sure to get his mercy. Their material qualifications, although so enormous, were no obstacle to their devotional service. No obstacle to their presenting themselves to Lord Chaitanya. So we can think for ourselves. Regardless of our material pedigree, our qualifications, do we really feel that we are competent and expert? If that is truly so, how is it that we're in the material world? How is it that we have a material body if we're so competent and expert? If we look in the mirror and we see a material body, we should know. Not expert. And that's the example that Rupa and Sanatan set for us. They present to Lord Chaitanya, "Sir, we belong to the lowest class of men, and our associates and employment are also of the lowest type. Therefore, we cannot introduce ourselves to you. We feel very much ashamed standing here before you." Have you ever said that to anyone? We cannot introduce ourselves to you because we're so low. You never said like that. Allow me to introduce myself to you. You would be happy to know me. I'm sure you want to know me. But to be ashamed to introduce yourself to someone? I can't introduce myself to you. I'm very ashamed to stand before you. And to actually feel that? We may say that, you know. Sometimes it's devotee lingo. Prabhu, I'm so fallen. But to feel that in your heart? Oh, my goodness. I'm ashamed to stand before you. I remember in Los Angeles, when I was with the BBT, Srila Prabhupada came in my office with a few other devotees. And so I had read in the second canto that you approach an extraordinary personality or the deity by first looking at the feet. So he was standing in my office, and I was just staring at his feet. And then gradually I lifted my vision. Looking back to that time, 1975, I don't think I felt ashamed to stand before him. I wasn't that Krishna conscious. But I was aware that this person is not from this world. I'm looking at the feet of an emissary from the spiritual world. So gradually I raised my eyes to see what Srila Prabhupada was looking at, because he was shorter than me, so I didn't have to raise my head all the way up. And I had a conception in my mind that he would be just totally detached from the circumstances and just be chanting Hare Krishna. That was, I had that conception in a minor way because I was surprised when I lifted my head all the way up. I saw his eyes just filled with tears of love of Krishna, and he's looking around at my office, and what was the first thing he said? This used to be a kitchen. Interesting, this bhakti. He's noting all the details, and he was right, it used to be a kitchen. But for Krishna service, he's on to everything. Yes, his eyes were just tear-filled. But at the same time, it's not a neophyte's conception of what love of Krishna is. He saw everything around him as ready to serve Krishna. This used to be a kitchen. So we can also think about when we met wonderful devotees and what we were thinking at that time. And it's so important, Rupa and Sanatan's example. They felt it from the heart. We don't deserve this. We're ashamed to stand before you. What to speak of confessing our sinful activities? That's even more, that brings even more shame. So I think perhaps we can take some questions and we can continue with this Lila the next time we meet. So we'll hear exactly how Rupa and Sanatan Goswami make their presentation to Lord Chaitanya and appeal to him to do something. They're expert. They want a certain result, which is totally genuine. It's what they should want. And then we'll hear about the reaction of the devotees to Rupa and Sanatan becoming initiated and getting the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So for now, we'll ask you, maybe there are some questions. Yes.
Rupa and Sanatan, they were very busy and very expertly involved with the material energy. And then they met Lord Chaitanya, and after due deliberation, they left that material energy. So, can you tell us about the neophytes, devotee who's very involved in the material world? The neophyte devotee might be very involved with the material world, and we hear the calling of Lord Chaitanya from great personalities all around us, but it is not our service to lead.
Everything has a proper time, and we'll deal with that the next time, because Lord Chaitanya and Rupa and Sanatan have been in correspondence, just like people email now. Back then they did write letters. And so Lord Chaitanya will point out that I studied your letters and I understood your heart. And therefore I sent you by mail an instruction. The instruction simply said, a woman who has a paramour does all her household duties so nicely so the husband won't suspect. But internally she's always thinking of her paramour. That was the instruction Lord Chaitanya sent by post to Rupa and Sanatan in response to their letters. So Lord Chaitanya instructed that they go on with their duties in the world, but in their heart of hearts, they're always thinking about their paramour, Radha and Krishna. So many of our devotees work, but they don't go to work to get. They go to work to give. It's a totally different consciousness. As Bhagavatam says, that work should not be done for gratification. Work should be done for spiritual purposes. First canto. When you go to work in order to get, you're thinking, this job is meant to give me money so I can get things from me, and those related to me, those are favorable to me. So naturally you're in anxiety. But if you go to work in order to give, what are you thinking? I'm doing this job so I can give a bhakti lifestyle to myself, to my family, and to as many people in the world as my resources allow. That's a totally different consciousness. When you go to work in order to get, you're passionate, you're grouchy, you're angry, you're lusty. I'm not getting enough. What's upsetting my program for acquisition? Just like Hiranyakashipu, for example. He controlled all the three worlds and he still was dissatisfied to the extent he was becoming mad. He is the classic proof that material growth will not satisfy him. In spite of Hiranyakashipu's having more than you could ever conceive of materially, his dissatisfaction increased. But a devotee going to work to support his or her family, they're going to work to give. With the money, they're going to support a bhakti lifestyle, not only for themselves, but for as many others as their financial resources in their particular situation allows. A totally different vision. So while Rupa and Sanatan worked for the Mohammedan king, they did their job. They did their job so well, the Mohammedan king could leave the whole kingdom and go out plundering other places. That's why he will get so angry when he hears that the two brothers want to quit their job. Wait a minute. I practically put everything under your control. If you leave, how will I be able to go here and there plundering people? You've got to stay in your job. They made themselves, by their expertise, irreplaceable. That's how good they were. But in the evening, they would go back to their estate in Ramkeli and hear Bhagavatam, and there was Radhakun, Shamakun. They made their whole estate to remind them of Vrindavan. So we can take inspiration from their example if we are working in this world. Just sannyasis also. We don't have a job in the ordinary sense, but we have to deal with things like traveling to airports and constantly. And so we also want to remember Krishna. So please remember this. You go to work to give, not to get. Look at your life and see why you're working. A devotee is not working for material acquisition. You're always thinking how to expand the bhakti lifestyle, how to support the bhakti lifestyle with whatever financial proceeds I get. If I'm able to help with these proceeds, if I'm able that others can be Krishna conscious through the use of my proceeds, that is glorious. Everyone can help to some degree. Any other questions? Shesha Prabhu, Hare Krishna. We're very blessed to have Shesha Prabhu here. He surprised me completely by his presence. I have known him since, 1975. Did we first meet in LA or New York?
I first remember being on Harinam in Washington, D.C. with you. I think you were on a traveling party.
Oh, that was 73.
Something.
Ah, all right.
Mark, thank you very much for your lecture. And following on the answer you just gave to this question, in your lecture you were saying about how Krishna wouldn't make a process that it's difficult to achieve success in. And similarly, Krishna wants us to go to work to give. So what's the role of obstacles then? Because there seem to be a lot of obstacles that come up in trying to be successful in the execution of devotional service, and certainly there's obstacles that come up in our professional lives when we try to take that attitude of giving. What's the role of obstacles?
Yes. We need to understand the nature of the material world is an obstacle. It's an obstacle course. Once you get it out of the mind that this world is meant for our enjoyment, then you start to see the reality of the world. But when we think that the world's meant for our enjoyment, we want to see opportunities for enjoyment everywhere. So we're always hoping. Material existence is a phenomenon of hope. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Asha Pasha Chataya Bhadra, bound by a network of false hopes. So, bhakti yogis have lost hope in material existence. But that's not a bad thing. And because you've lost hope in material existence as a source of your satisfaction, you're able to see clearly what it is. It's an obstacle course. Now, it's amazing that the bhakti process is able to utilize those obstacles as springboards for spiritual advancement. That is amazing. And ultimately, the same Maya that means illusion, as we become more advanced, that same Maya becomes mercy. Example I like to give. Let's say you're walking through Gita Nagari and you're casually chanting your japa on the way to the temple program, and then some stray dog from off the property starts to chase at your heels. A little dog, but still it's barking and trying to nip at your heels. And so what do? You start picking up your pace and walking to get to the temple quicker. So the little dog, although a pain in the neck, is actually increasing your speed to your destination. So the obstacles of material existence, when seen through mature bhakti yoga, cause us to accelerate in going back to Godhead. I'll never forget His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj speaking here during his last days. His body attacked so thoroughly by cancer. And he said with 100% conviction and sincerity, if I had to choose about this happening again, I would choose it to happen again, because what he implied was that what seems to be an obstacle has been the gateway to the greatest benefit. This is how powerful bhakti is. If I had to choose whether this should happen again, I would choose it to happen again. What seems to be an obstacle to one person, for a devotee, is an accelerator back to Godhead. So we don't have any false hopes about the material world. We've lost hope. Our hopes are in Krishna, and those hopes are always fulfilled. Because we have no hopes about material existence, we're able to see the material reality for what it is, an obstacle course. But we're not just totally absorbed in obstacle consciousness. No, we are aspiring for Krishna consciousness. As Krishna says at the end of Bhagavad Gita, if you're always conscious of me, then by my grace you'll cross over all the obstacles. And we get that grace through engagement in devotional service. This is what Rupa and Sanatan are begging for. And then, as we'll hear in the future, Lord Chaitanya will ask the devotee to bless them. The blessings of the devotees allow us to have devotional service. So I want to be mindful of the schedule, and I thank you very much. Hare Krishna.